Hey, everybody, welcome back to Marketplace Growth by Accoil. This week, we're talking about problems. And hey, we all have problems, but we're not talking about personal problems this week. We're talking about customer problems and why it's important to focus on those, sometimes instead of thinking just about solutions. Kate, welcome back to the show. It's been a couple weeks.
Yes, hello, back from hiking in New Zealand.
Happy to have you back. I hope you had a great trip.
I did. Thank you, everybody.
Awesome. All right, so today, customer problems. We're going to talk about why it's important to understand customer problems, what some of the pitfalls of like a solutions first thinking could be, and also some ways that you can go about uncovering the real problems that your customers have. So instead of getting yourself locked into a solutions only focus, how do you go back to the customer and focus on solving the problems for them? So Kate, let's talk about real quick, how do you understand what customer problems are, and perhaps talk us through, at what level are we really talking here when you're looking for problems?
So from my book, it's always on the hunt, listening to problems, because anytime there's friction, it gives an opportunity to be solved, and then from that to be able to monetize. So for me, problems are just literally the fundamental thing that we should be looking for, business problems. And how we can solve them. And I think the way I normally do that is I get people to talk about what they're doing in their jobs and their work and seeing what comes up in those conversations. So it's about their workflow, and you start to understand that workflow and the jobs to be done that emanate from the workflow. And by systematically asking about what people are focusing on and how's it going and where are they having problems, etc., is actually how you unearth these little gems of what the problem is. And then when you package it all up together, you actually start to get some sort of systematic thinking about what the true problems are.
Yeah. And so I guess, the way that I like to think about this is really at that, as you mentioned, the workflow level. So we're solving, look, we're talking B2B here, right? So we're solving customer problems in other businesses. So we're not talking personal problems, as we said. It's things like, in my day-to-day job, how can you make, what problems do I have? What hurdles do I have? And how can we help as a solution provider to that? One thing, I guess, before we carry on is, why not start with solutions? Why start with problems? Like, why is that an important point of view to take when you're starting off?
Well, I think it speaks for itself, really, because what happens if you're focusing on the wrong solution? And particularly if you're a bit of a systems thinker, which I do love a bit of systems thinking, you could actually be focusing on the wrong solution or the symptomatic solution, i.e., so whenever you hear something around like, oh, this always happens around us, this keeps happening, you probably actually got a root cause problem, but sometimes you can actually choose and think you've hooked into something, but it's actually not really the true problem. It could be just a fake or a temporary solution, which sometimes can also be suitable as well, may I say, Pete, but that's clouding the issue.
Sometimes, yes, yeah. Don't take us off track here, Kate.
I'm going down that hole, Peter. Going down that hole.
So I think it's easy for all of us to go into that, thinking about solutions, thinking solutions first. Here's how I want to solve a problem. Here's a cool solution in search of a problem. What are some of the pitfalls? Like, if that's the way that you're approaching things, what can go wrong? I think the first one that we have here is just misaligned with market needs. And as you said, right, like, you can have these wonderful solutions, but if they're not solving a real need in that root cause or that root problem, what ends up happening there? I mean, can you share a time when maybe you've done that? I can definitely share a time when I've done that, but do you have any stories about, like, maybe going solutions first yourself?
Oh gosh, how many minutes and hours have we got? Particularly when you're doing process improvement, you can often get hooked on the wrong thing. I'm just trying to think of something that comes to mind, Pete.
Well, maybe instead of a specific time, how can we frame this differently to say, like, what's an example when you think of this? What's an example of being solutions first instead of problem focused?
Well, I think it particularly happens when you're starting out with a new product. You love to tell people about your product rather than actually hearing about what's important to them. So, for example, when I'm often around marketplace vendors, I often hear them talking about their solutions first. and not about asking about asking the customer what their issue is, and first. And I always remember a very, very skilled a solution partner, and gorgeous, gorgeous. And I always remember him saying to me, and he'd introduced me to one of his best clients, and he tapped me on the shoulder and he stopped me and he said, "Kate," he said, "you're talking a lot and you're not asking them what their problem is." And I just looked at him and I said, "Thank you so much. You're absolutely right." So that was quite chastening and embarrassing, but it actually was a very important moment.
It's nice to have people that'll do that to you, right? I mean, just sort of pull you back and say, "Hold on, let's focus where we should be here."
Yes.
I think one of the things that can come out of that is just a lot of wasted time. Right?
Yeah.
And if we're spending too much time focusing on the solutions that we have built and that we are trying to sell, a lot of things, when I say like wasting time, wasting resources, I think there's a lot of missed opportunity in that as well. Right? If you're too solutions focused, the positioning that you have, the messaging that you're using can often go down, say, the wrong path. And especially if we're talking marketplace here, you don't have that many opportunities to get in front of people and tell them how you solve their problems. So every opportunity missed could be big business, right?
I think we need to also clarify here. We're talking a lot about the discovery phase. There does come a time when you've actually researched and talked and worked through the problems and you genuinely think you've got a genuine, valid, valuable solution. So it's not an either or, it's an and, but it's understanding that the problem solving, problem seeking, the problem discovery, the problem investigation comes first, and make sure you give that a good amount of time.
Yeah. One other thing that we have written down here that kind of relates to that is spending time on the problems actually can help you stand apart, right? So pre-launch, but also post-launch, like as you're developing your product, if you spend too much time looking at what, say, competitors are doing or their solutions and not really understanding what the underlying problems are, you can end up with very much of a Me Too product, which sometimes there are table stakes features, right? But other times you don't necessarily want to solve a problem the same exact way as everyone else. I think you can put a lot of weight into other people's solutions and maybe they're getting it wrong. So you don't want to follow that path either necessarily. And I think you can miss a lot of opportunity if you're not understanding that underlying problem.
I agree.
All right. We're going to move on now to uncovering the problem. It's nice to talk about. It makes it sound very easy when you say, hey, you just focus on the problems, but how do you actually uncover those problems? And you've kind of given us a few hints on that one already, Kate. And I've having worked alongside you for a while now, you're very good at this. And can you tell us a couple of ways that you like to go about getting to understand problems from customers and understanding exactly what they are?
Well, I think for me, I'm genuinely interested in how people work. So I think if you can actually come from a place of where you're genuinely interested in someone, how they work and ask their questions, and I think that's a very good starting point. And if we look at the product, we're now starting to develop the product analytics tool. That's exactly what we're spending time on. We're going out to the world to certain events where we think our target markets are. And that's exactly what we're doing at the moment, isn't it, Pete? We're going to 3 different events with 3 different target audiences. And there's you and me going with Simon, and we're literally splitting up to talk to different people about what's important to them and what's not important to them. So for me, the customer interviews. And then when you've actually got something, looking at your support, what comes in via support, to me, that's absolutely critical. And teaching your support people to actually ask the open-ended questions and follow up on things, and get them to actually refer across to you if they think there's someone who genuinely could be interested. And I used to do that all the time with Simon. Used to roll his eyes at me. But at Proforma, I was always saying to him, Simon, I think this person has a lot to offer in terms of new product and new features. I think you really should talk to them about where they're thinking, because they are using the product in a different way. So to me, that was really critical. And of course, it's that whole feedback loop around and through between sales, support, customer success. I mean, you really can't underestimate all of that relationship between, and so often it's silos, and so often everyone's moving so fast. But if you can actually build a continuum between all the areas of some good conversation and people understanding what's trying to be achieved, it really is worth its weight in gold. It's absolute gold nuggets you get.
Yeah. And that actually spins out to something that we continue to talk about a lot here is those use cases, right? And so understanding really at the heart of those use cases is what the customer problem is. It's what is this workflow? Where are the problems, and how can we insert our product or solution in there to help them? So that feedback loop to me is where a lot of your growth content comes from, because it helps customers look at what you're producing and say, hey, they actually understand what they understand my pain. So I'm going to look at their solution. So I think there's a lot that comes out of understanding that problem and getting to know it really well and being almost obsessive about those problems. And to your point, there are always going to be unique problems. Every customer that you talk to is going to approach something slightly differently. So there's always tons to learn and to be curious about. I'm going to wrap us up with that one. So again, we were talking about problems being customer problem focused instead of jumping right to solutions. Of course, solutions are always important, but understanding the problems helps you do so much more in your business. Talk to your customers, be curious, learn their problems, learn where they fit into the workflow, and learn better how you can help solve them and support them in that journey. See you next time, everybody.